If you've ever opened a research paper and thought, I want to understand this, but this is dense, then this podcast is for you. Every day, thousands of research papers are published. Most of them are rigorous, insightful, and almost impossible for non-specialists to read comfortably. But the ideas inside them shape medicine, technology, business, and society. Welcome to One Paper Orbit. We are a research paper podcast. Here, we take peer-reviewed research and turn it into clear, structured conversations without adding speculation, without exaggeration, simply making the original work easier to understand. Today, we are discussing a paper authored by A. Hutton, A. Logic, A. Wilson, P. Cara, and J. Wance, titled Recreational Drug Use and Drug Checking in Outdoor Music Festival, Implications for Mass Gathering Health, published on 18 February 2026 in Mass Gathering Medicine. This discussion is based on a paper published under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license. The original authors retain credit for their work. This podcast provides an adapted explanation for educational purposes, with full citation and license information provided in the description.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Usually when we think about a medical emergency, we picture this highly controlled environment.
Right, like a hospital.
Exactly, like
Yeah.
a hospital ER. It's sterile, the lights are super bright, and, well, all the variables are locked down. You go in with a broken bone, you get an x-ray, and boom, you have a clear, predictable diagnosis.
Yeah, the data is just right in front of the doctor.
Mm.
It's binary, it's clean, and the treatment path is pretty obvious from the start.
But then, you step into the medical tent at a massive outdoor music festival, and it's like a totally different planet.
Oh, completely.
The bass from the main stage is literally vibrating the dirt under your feet. It's like 90 degrees out. People are packed shoulder to shoulder. And that predictability we talked about, it just completely vanishes.
Yeah, it's gone. Suddenly, the medical staff aren't just treating a clear symptom. They're dealing with this chaotic, swirling mix of extreme environmental factors, crowd psychology, and hidden chemistry.
Hidden chemistry, that's a good way to put it.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. You have patients coming in who literally can't articulate what they took. Or worse, they think they took one thing, but their body is actually reacting to a completely different, unexpected chemical compound.
Right. And navigating those muddy waters is the whole mission of our deep dive today. We are looking at this highly detailed survey of, I think it was just over 500 attendees at 2 different outdoor music festivals in New Zealand.
Yeah, 502 attendees to be exact.
Okay, right. So the goal here for you, the listener, is to really understand how young adults, specifically that 18 to 30 demographic, interact with recreational drugs in these dense crowd environments.
And critically, we need to figure out why the safety measures designed to protect them, specifically drug checking services, are just overwhelmingly being ignored or bypassed.
Which is wild to think about. But to even begin solving that problem, we have to understand the baseline behavior of the people walking through those festival gates. Because there is this very pervasive cultural narrative about what happens at music festivals that actually clouds public health policy.
Oh, absolutely. It clouds it entirely.
Right. It's like the myth of the festival binge. Let's unpack this for a second. People often assume a music festival acts as this lawless alternate reality, right?
Yeah, like a totally different zone.
Exactly. The assumption is you take a bunch of innocent, law-abiding young people, you drop them in a field with laser lights, and they suddenly go wild and transform into these reckless experimenters. Like, they just lose their minds simply because the bass drops.
Which is exactly the assumption this paper shatters. The survey data paints a completely different, honestly, much more mundane picture of what's going on.
Mundane, really?
Yeah, I mean, the median age of the participants surveyed was 22. And a massive 81% of them stated they had used recreational drugs in the past.
Wait, 81%?
Yeah, 81%. And this was long before they even bought a ticket to these specific events.
So they aren't, like, discovering this behavior at the festival itself?
Not at all. The data shows that the vast majority of these attendees are basically just continuing their normal, everyday habits. I mean, about a third of them take drugs once or twice a month normally, and another 30% use them occasionally, so less than once a month.
Wow.
And the substances of choice are also entirely consistent with their home lives.
Let me guess. Mostly MDMA.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, MDMA, often known as ecstasy, is by far the most prominent. I think as more than half of the attendees reported taking it prior to attending the festival, and about a third used it as a single-use substance at the event itself.
Okay, so cannabis has to be in there too, right?
It is, yeah. Cannabis was a distant second, though.
Okay, so essentially, attendees are just packing their standard weekend routines into their backpacks right along with their camping gear and their sunscreen.
Basically, yeah.
But wait, if this behavior is just a continuation of their normal life, why does it trigger such an intense crisis at the medical tent? I mean, if a 22-year-old takes MDMA on a random Tuesday in their apartment and they are totally fine, why does doing it on a Saturday at a festival put such a unique strain on the health system?
That is the crucial distinction, really. And it's where the study of mass gathering medicine comes in. The behavior itself is statistically normal for this demographic. Sociologists and psychologists actually call this period emerging adulthood.
Emerging adulthood.
Right. It's a recognized developmental window. It's driven by identity exploration, sensation seeking, and, deep peer influence. So the drug use isn't the anomaly here.
Oh, I see. The environment is the anomaly.
Exactly. Think about the physiological differences. Taking a substance in a climate-controlled living room where you have easy access to tap water, a comfortable couch, and maybe 3 trusted friends is one physiological experience.
Right, it's controlled.
Right. But take that exact same human being and drop them into an extreme environment. We are talking massive crowd density where the ambient temperature just spikes. Intense heat exposure from the sun all day.
Yeah, and the dancing?
Oh, the prolonged, extreme physical exertion from dancing for hours on end, dehydration, and just a total lack of immediate infrastructure.
So your body is basically running a marathon inside a sauna while trying to process a powerful stimulant.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. That extreme physical toll is what turns routine day-to-day drug use into a mass-gathering medical liability. The variable changing isn't the human, it's the arena.
Okay, so the environment is a total pressure cooker. But you'd think that if people know they're stepping into a furnace, they'd, want to test their gear before going in.
You would think so, yeah.
Because if drug use is a normalized, predictable factor, and the environment is uniquely dangerous, the logical next step has to be risk mitigation. But the data reveals a massive, honestly almost confusing disconnect here regarding drug checking.
It is a staggering disconnect.
Yeah.
I mean, despite the high prevalence of drug use we just talked about, over 80% of the participants in this study did not utilize the official off-site checking services that were provided.
Wait, 80% just ignored it. Let me clarify. These were professional testing services, right?
Yes, very professional. They were run by an organization called Know Your Stuff NZ. They set up these testing facilities 2 days prior to the events in the host cities.
2 whole days before.
Yeah, and it was completely free, objective chemical analysis using advanced mass spectrometry. And yet, only about 18% of attendees actually walked through the doors to use them.
So 4 out of 5 people are just flying completely blind into this pressure cooker.
Well, here is the nuance. They don't think they're flying blind. They are relying on highly subjective, honestly incredibly flawed safety checks instead.
Like what?
When asked how they knew their drugs were safe, about 30% said they relied on a friend or an NGO just verbally telling them it was safe.
Just telling them?
Yeah, and another quarter of them trusted the drug simply because they had, quote, bought it from that person before.
Wow. That logic is wild to me. I mean, think about how you calculate risk in your own life. If you have to drive 20 minutes out of your way to check your tire pressure before a massive cross-country road trip, you might just kick the tire, look at your friend and say, looks fine, right? And drive off.
That's exactly what these attendees are doing.
They are using social reassurance to replace actual scientific testing. Chemistry doesn't care if your buddy thinks the pill looks familiar.
It really doesn't. What's fascinating here is that this behavior perfectly illustrates what psychologists call the intention-action gap.
The intention-action gap.
Yeah, it's like buying a gym membership with the intention of getting healthy, but never actually going to the gym. It's not that these emerging adults want to be reckless, they actively want to be safe.
Okay.
They are actively seeking out reassurance from friends or relying on past purchases as this mental proxy for safety. They just lack accessible, objective tools at the exact moment their brain is trying to assess the risk.
But they did have access to tools. The offsite testing was right there 2 days before. Plus, I remember the survey mentioned that around 30% used a chemical reagent kit they bought at a pharmacy. So some people are at least trying to test things themselves.
True, yeah. Reagent kits are definitely a step up from just asking a friend. But think about how a region kit actually works in practice.
Just those little liquid dropper things, right?
Exactly. You have to scrape off a tiny bit of the pill, drop this highly corrosive chemical liquid onto it, and then watch closely to see if it turns purple or black within 30 seconds, just to guess the primary compound.
That sounds tricky.
It is. It still places the entire burden of chemical analysis on a 22-year-old who might be sitting in a dimly lit camping tent at midnight. It's an incredibly fragile safety net compared to, professional mass spectrometry analysis.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question. If these attendees genuinely want to be safe and they know subjective guessing is risky, why on earth are they actively avoiding the professional off-site testing services that were literally handed to them on a silver platter?
Well, we have to look at the psychological barriers and the specific risk calculus they're performing. The researchers asked them exactly why they didn't go to the off-site facility. Over 40% cited potential legal repercussions.
40%, wow.
Yeah, and another 8% worried the drugs would simply be confiscated. And interestingly, nearly 23% feared finding out the drugs were unsafe.
Fear of finding out, like an ignorance is bliss kind of thing, so I can just enjoy my weekend without worrying about it.
Exactly that. It's pure cognitive dissonance. But the legal fear, that is the dominant driver. And it creates a really fascinating paradox in the data.
How so?
Because simultaneously, these exact same attendees widely recognize the benefits of drug checking. Nearly 3/4 of them said testing increases safety. 2/3 see it as vital harm reduction.
And didn't an overwhelming majority say they actually want it everywhere?
Yes, 97%. 97% of attendees agreed that drug checking should be available at all outdoor music festivals.
Okay, so what does this all mean? You have 97% of people literally begging for this service, saying, yes, we need this everywhere to stay alive. But over 80% refuse to use it when it's offered off-site 2 days before the festival.
Right.
It seems to me they are making a very specific and honestly somewhat rational calculation based on how human brains process threats.
What do you mean?
Well, our brains are notoriously terrible at weighing abstract future risks against immediate concrete dangers. So these attendees are sitting in their apartments on a Thursday. To use the off-site testing, they have to put illicit substances into their car, drive across town, and walk into a known public facility.
Yeah, that's a lot of exposure.
Exactly. The risk of getting pulled over by a police officer, getting arrested, and having their future ruined is immediate and it's concrete. But the risk of an untested pill causing a medical emergency on Saturday, that's an abstract future possibility. So they choose the immediate safety of staying home, even if it physically endangers them later.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, your assessment hits the nail on the head, and it proves exactly why the concept of off-site testing is fundamentally flawed for this demographic.
It just doesn't fit reality.
Right. Expecting attendees to transport drugs to a separate location days before the event, it completely ignores human nature and basic logistics. It demands that they assume maximum legal exposure at a time when they aren't even in the festival mindset yet.
They aren't in the furnace yet.
Exactly, they're not in the furnace. This data strongly suggests that testing must be embedded directly into the event itself.
So on-site.
Yes, on-site. By putting the testing tent inside the festival gates, you remove the barrier of transportation. You minimize the concrete fear of a traffic stop. You essentially align the safety intervention with the exact moment the person is actually planning to take the substance.
Okay, I love that theory, but I want to push back a little and play this out in the real world.
Okay,
Let's assume we remove all the barriers. We embed the testing inside the festival, right next to the main stage. A festival goer walks in, hands over their pill, and gets it tested. What actually happens if the machine spits out a red light?
a bad result.
Yeah. If the results come back as dangerous, does testing actually change their behavior? Because, frankly, my gut says a 22-year-old who paid $200 for a weekend isn't just going to throw their stash in the trash.
Your gut is picking up on a very complex picture of human psychology revealed in the data. So first, the good news. Of the drugs that were tested in this study, most were indeed what the user expected.
Okay, that's good.
But about 22% were classified as moderately risky, and 8% were downright risky. Like the user was explicitly advised by staff not to take them.
Oof. 8% is a lot of people when you have tens of thousands in a crowd.
It is. And here's where it gets really interesting. When the researchers asked the attendees if they would alter their behavior based on that risky result, it was almost a 50-50 split.
Really?
Yeah. Half of the people listened to the warning, accept the lost money, and say they won't take the drug. That's a huge win for harm reduction.
Huge win.
But nearly half, about 44%, look at a scientifically confirmed dangerous result and decide to swallow it anyway.
Oh, wow. See, that is exactly what I was wondering. How do we explain that?
It comes down to the neuroscience of risk-taking in emerging adults, combined with intense social pressure. In that 18 to 30 demographic, the brain's dopamine reward systems are highly active, while the prefrontal cortex,
The part that pumps the brakes, right?
exactly the part that says bad idea, is still maturing. Add in the sunk cost fallacy. The idea of, I paid $50 for this, I can't waste it. And then the groupthink of being surrounded by friends who are already high. The warning label just completely loses its power.
But wait, hold on. If almost half the people are taking the drugs, even after a test tells them it's toxic, couldn't authorities just argue that these embedded testing tents are a massive waste of resources? I mean, why should medical staff bother funding and staffing these tents if the attendees are just going to ignore the chemical results anyway?
It's a completely valid challenge, honestly. But it fundamentally misunderstands the core goal of harm reduction. Harm reduction is not a magic wand.
Right.
It does not entirely eliminate risk-taking. What testing provides is informed consent and behavioral modification.
What do you mean by behavioral modification? Because they still took the toxic pill.
Yes, but how they take it changes entirely. Even if someone chooses to consume a moderately risky substance, knowing its contents removes the element of surprise.
Oh.
They might decide to only take half the pill instead of the whole thing, just to gauge the effect. They might actively ensure they're drinking more water. They might tell their friends, hey, watch me closely. Or they might intentionally stay closer to the medical tent. That awareness alone prevents emergency room visits.
Oh, so it changes from a blind gamble to a calculated risk.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. But there's another data point here that I think is like the secret weapon of the whole system. The survey showed that nearly 86% of attendees said they would share their drug checking results with their friends, mostly via direct text messages or face-to-face conversation.
Yes. This is arguably the most powerful finding in the entire paper. This transforms a single drug test into a crowdsourced early warning system.
It's essentially a digital immune response. Think about it. One person acts as the white blood cell. They encounter the toxin at the testing tent, and they instantly send chemical signals, or in this case text messages, to immunize the rest of the festival body.
That's a great way to put it.
They text like, hey, the blue pills with the smiley face are laced with bath salts, don't take them.
That is a brilliant analogy because 86% of people text their networks. You don't actually need to test every single pill in the festival to protect the crowd. That informal communication network ripples outward, warning hundreds of people who never even walked into the testing tent. It acts as a massive multiplier for public health.
So taking all this data together, the fact that drug use is a normalized baseline, the psychological barriers that make off-site testing a logistical failure, and the complex text message-driven outcomes of on-site testing, how do we actually protect people at these mass gatherings moving forward?
Well, the authors of the paper draw a very firm, unapologetic conclusion. Mass gathering medicine must completely abandon abstinence-only approaches.
Let's throw it out.
Yep. Telling people, just don't do drugs at festivals, is demonstrably ineffective. Planners must anticipate recreational drug use as a baseline reality, just like they anticipate the need for portable toilets and food vendors.
Meaning, we have to design health systems for the reality we actually have, not the sanitized, perfect reality we want.
Exactly.
The survey explicitly showed that 34% of people are very likely to take drugs, even if absolutely no testing is available anywhere. So if event organizers just ignore the problem or pretend a zero-tolerance policy at the front gate works, they are practically guaranteeing a crisis in their medical tent.
Precisely. The evidence-based strategies recommended by the authors include making embedded on-site drug checking a standard practice, but it also extends to the physical environment. Guaranteed free water access to combat dehydration, shaded chill-out spaces to combat the heat and sensory overstimulation, and critically, a coordinated structural response between agencies.
Coordinated meaning everyone talking to each other, like breaking down the silos.
Yes, and this raises a really important question about how events are policed. Historically, event promoters, medical staff, and law enforcement operate in silos. Police are there to prevent crime and maintain order in the crowd of 30,000 people.
Which is a valid necessity.
It's totally valid. But when their mandate intersects physically with a medical tent's mandate to treat overdoses, problems arise. If police are stationed right outside the medical tent or monitoring the line for the drug checking service, that psychological barrier we discussed earlier slams right back down.
The fear comes back.
The concrete fear of arrest returns. The authorities must work together to create a genuine safety net rather than an adversarial trap.
It really is a delicate ecosystem. You change one variable, like where the testing tent is located or who's standing next to it in a uniform, and you completely alter the medical outcomes for the entire weekend. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to mull over based on this evidence.
What's on your mind?
Well, if 97% of festival attendees desperately want on-site testing to stay safe, but the concrete fear of legal repercussions keeps 40% of them away from even off-site testing, are the current structures of event policing actually contributing to the very medical emergencies they were originally designed to prevent?
That is the multi-million-dollar public health question.
Right. If the presence of a uniform makes a kid guess blindly instead of testing chemically, the system is breaking itself.
It forces us to ask what our ultimate goal really is. Is it strict legal enforcement or the preservation of human life?
Exactly. And it brings us right back to that medical tent we talked about at the very beginning. It's never going to be that sterile, predictable, bright, white hospital room. The muddy waters of a festival are always going to be complex, driven by youth, extreme environments, and hidden chemistry. But maybe with embedded testing and a real understanding of human psychology, we can at least turn the lights on in that tent.
Well said.
This paper is published under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license, and full credit is provided in the episode description. Thank you for listening to One Paper Orbit, our research paper podcast. Our goal is to make peer-reviewed research accessible to everyone. If this episode was helpful, please share your thoughts and let us know which papers you'd like us to explore next. Thank you.